Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation. Well, Chris, chapter number 10, day number 10 of Dream Big by Bob Goff. Thanks to everyone who's been listening so far. It's been a great book. I'm really excited about these next couple of chapters here. These are some good ones. Yeah. Really enjoyed reading them. Also, to those of you listening, wherever you are, at home, in your car, at work, if you've been reading these chapters and following along with us, go ahead and reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well on this chapter and any other chapters that we've read so far. 100 Calls a Day, chapter 10, that's one we're reading today. So if you have any thoughts for this chapter, feel free to reach out at readtoknowpod, readtoknowpod@gmail.com, any of those. Let us know what you think of this chapter.
Right. Yeah, we've been getting some comments on social media and stuff like that, and we love seeing those. So thank you to everyone who has been listening and following along. We love to know who's listening because we see how many downloads that we get, and we see the numbers, but we love to put faces with those numbers. So we'd love to hear from you, especially as we discuss these next this chapter here, chapter 10, which is a great chapter, which is entitled 100 Calls a Day. And subtitle, Availability is Your Secret Weapon. And when I first read this, just because I know Bob Goff so well, when I first read this, I knew he was going to mention that he personally gets over 100 calls a day, and that's probably why. And he's making a point on that, but why he probably called this chapter 100 Calls a Day.
Right. Yeah, he puts his phone number in the back of every single book that he has written, and he gets 100 calls a day. I don't know how the man gets anything done, because he also mentions in this chapter is that when he has a conversation with someone, or he has something that he learned or he wants to remember, he emails himself. And he said he emails himself about 100 to 150 times a day, and then he reads them all that night.
Right. I have no idea how he gets anything done, because if I get 2 calls in a day and they're longer conversations, I feel like my day is just shot.
And somehow he's written 3 books in the last, like 5 to 8 years or however long.
Right.
I mean, the man is he must be a productivity machine.
He must be, because he's put out 2 books since putting his number in the first one.
Right.
But he starts off with this fact because he's trying to make the point about availability and our ambition. So that's kind of like our one word for this chapter is availability.
Yeah, that's the subtitle here. Availability is your secret weapon. And that's what he's talking about here, because basically he's kind of it's this reverse idea to what you see in a lot of at least secular books and teachings when it comes to productivity and self-management. They say limit yourself to people. Don't answer the phone unless it's like turn off your phone. Don't answer it while you're working throughout the day. Avoid distractions, like go to your office, shut the door, don't come out for 4 to 5 hours at a time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Check your emails once a day. Don't email yourself 100 to 150 times.
Yeah, check your email once a day. Yeah, exactly. All those productivity tips and things. And in a way, more or less, Bob Goff is just spitting in the face of those.
Right. Which, of course, his book is a little bit more on the ambitions, of course, dreaming side.
Yep.
Getting to where you want to be. But it takes productivity and a lot of self-management to get there.
Right.
But here he's saying that availability is your secret weapon. That availability brings opportunities, and with those opportunities, can come some ambitions maybe you never thought that you would chase.
Right. And kind of the underlying idea behind this is that being open to other people and letting people have be able to reach you and being available to other people, that actually has more positive benefits than if you were to guard all those people out of your life to try to be extra productive.
Right.
So the actual productivity that you gain from limiting yourself actually doesn't help you in the long run.
Right.
That's what he's getting at in this idea.
Right.
And it's just kind of an interesting idea because it's counterintuitive to, again, how most productivity books and ideas work.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like he's looking at it from a different angle. Some of these productivity gurus, in a sense, would look at it and say, shut yourself away so that you can check these things off the list, or you can spend time doing really important things, maybe not urgent but really important things. But he's looking at it and saying, okay, if you make yourself available, you may not get as much done on your list as you were thinking organizationally, but look at how productive you are and how much you do get done and can invest in other people as you make yourself available to them. Because he says in this chapter, probably my favorite quote from this chapter, is he says something to the effect of, people don't follow vision, which is something that we don't hear at all. I mean, in management and leadership, we're all about vision.
Gotta have vision.
Yeah, leadership gurus, that's all they talk about is vision, having a vision, following it, have a vision, communicating the vision, following the vision. He says that people follow availability.
Right.
People follow availability. So he is taking some of these ideas, as you said, and flipping them on their head.
Yeah. He also mentions with this idea of availability that it's not something to the extreme that, okay, now for the rest of your life, you don't do anything that you want to do and you just make yourself available to anyone and everyone 24/7. That's not what he's talking about here. And he specifies that there's a balance, right? Just like bringing back to the last book we read, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's a P to PC balance. There's a balance between the product and the product capability. So, just like he uses a lot in this chapter, he uses the example of Jesus oftentimes in this chapter talking about availability. When Jesus, he was alone a lot of the time. He spent a lot of time alone. But when he was available to people, he was available.
Man, he got a lot done too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he didn't have guards up. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, all right, talk to my disciples first and like they're the barriers, you know what I mean, to get to me. No, like when someone wanted to get to Jesus, he got to him. He didn't have anyone posting guard in between them trying to keep people away.
Right.
He made himself available to the people who wanted to get to him. And but he also spent time away. And so that kind of transition into this next section of the chapter where he talks about you actually have to be available to yourself as well.
Right. Yeah. So one word he uses in this chapter is kind of to take time to check yourself, to ask yourself, okay, how am I doing? Because if you're constantly making yourself available, and of course in this chapter, he's not talking about making yourself available to the point to where you just exhaust yourself. Of course, that's going to get in the way of you reaching your ambitions. But one thing that's going to help you on your journey to your ambition is every now and then having some time to yourself, getting away, as you said, and thinking, okay, how am I doing? What am I feeling right now? Is life going well? Is it not going so well? Going back to that reflection point in ourselves. And so he's constantly drawing us back to this place in this book. And so I think that he wants to keep that balance. And as we'll see tomorrow in tomorrow's podcast with chapter 11, he goes back kind of to community and being with other people. And so he shares that balance in this book. I think that he does that well. But yeah, we certainly have to get on our own, evaluate, and be honest with ourselves.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He says that ambitious people actually do that and they do it really well.
Yes.
So it's a skill to be learned and it's a skill to get good at. And eventually it'll get to the point where it just kind of happens naturally and you're able to check in with yourself throughout the day and kind of really just kind of have a better understanding. I think it's more of like, as he mentioned, a self-awareness of kind of even going through those couple of questions that we'd had those other chapters about of who are you, where are you, and what do you want, and among other questions as well, but just kind of always self-reflecting and self-pondering in a way that you're just acutely aware of how you're doing kind of every moment.
Right. Yeah, I really see those three questions as, of course, not just a one-time thing, and I think Bob Goff would see it the same way. That's a repetitious kind of thing. You mentioned the 7 highly effective habits book earlier, where in that book he talks about this is not just a one-time process. This, to build these habits, you need to come back to this book and reflect and reflect. I think in our journey on our way to our ambitions, those 3 questions. We'll kind of see him in each chapter kind of go back to some of those because they are that important, which is why I think he starts off the book with those kind of as a strong foundation.
Yeah.
But are you ready to get into the chapter?
Well, I want to talk about one more thing, and it's kind of he doesn't really have a section about this in the chapter, but it's kind of strung out throughout the entire chapter.
Okay.
And it's just kind of the overarching, like the actual, like the power of living this way, being available. It's kind of like why he calls it a secret weapon is because it is kind of like a superpower in that he makes a clear distinction that it's not the same as networking.
Yes,
and,
yes, he does.
And how networking is what he considers it to be very negative, actually.
He considers it to be a rookie move.
Right, because it's about you're trying to get to know someone so that you can get something out of the person.
Right.
And that's what most people associate networking as, in a sense. But this is not the same as networking, but it's going to actually have, I think, the benefits that people are wanting out of networking, and maybe even bigger benefits than networking alone, because the power of being available is that you just make real connections with people.
Right.
And you make connections with people more than if you block yourself off. You know what I mean? And you make connections with anyone and everyone who's willing to engage with you.
Right. There's no hidden agenda. Not that there's always a hidden agenda necessarily with networking, but he describes networking kind of as, you may be doing something for the other person, but there's a motive there. Mm-hmm. And that motive is oftentimes to get something out of that person. And so I like how he distinguished the difference between network and availability, right. Because a lot of us, especially in the business world, may do a lot of networking but don't make ourselves very available. Right.
And he gives a few examples in this chapter that of being available actually ends up having those profound benefits to that opening doors, opening opportunities. Like we were talking about a couple of chapters ago where he's talking about you feel like God may have shut the door, go find a window. Sometimes just being available, in a sense, opens that door or opens that window.
Right.
And I think that's what he's getting at here with being available. It opens opportunities, and it helps you be more attuned to the opportunities that might be handed to you or presented to you.
Right.
And that's what he's talking about here, which is just an interesting idea. I don't think we oftentimes correlate being available and open to people and letting interruptions happen, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Equal, or have the profound ability to affect positive opportunities that have profound impact on our lives, either that day or later on down the road that we're not even aware of yet until they show up down the road.
Right. Yeah.
Which is the possibility that happens when we keep ourselves available.
Yes. Yeah. That exact reason is why this chapter is so impactful for people who can tend to be a little selfish, like myself. I would say sometimes I'm that way, where I can be a little selfish, where you might take more time to think about your own good rather than the good of others. And then also, if you're really task oriented, like we've discussed, that we both can be at the same time. But that's a good analogy that you brought out, that really when you make yourself available, you bring out opportunities and can do things that maybe you would have never seen yourself doing, or having opportunities that you would have never seen yourself having.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I can think of a couple instances, even kind of off the top of my head, of times where maybe I was more available. I didn't have to make myself available, but then I chose to. But then even maybe not that day or not that week, but later on down the line, it ended up paying off in a way that I was not expecting.
Exactly.
So that's the power. That's why he calls it your secret weapon.
Yeah.
Here.
And it's secret
in chasing your ambitions.
Right. Yeah, and it's secret because how many of us truly do make ourselves available,
Right.
as Bob Goff does and as he describes in this book. And so it's secret because not many people are doing it.
Right. And I think that's the interesting thing about this chapter and some of the other chapters that we've read already, and maybe even some that you have yet to talk about, is that a lot of what he says kind of goes against the grain.
Yeah.
And of maybe what we've known and what we've been taught. But the reason that it's powerful is because it goes against the grain.
That's
I
right.
think is part of why some of these chapters are so profoundly impactful.
Right.
So
Right.
Anyway, let's pull the book out and take a look.
Yes, there's a quote here on the very first page towards the bottom that I think is good. He tells us why he put his numbers in the book. And he says that our availability to one another is a pretty good measure of how available we will be to opportunities that come our way. And to chase our ambitions, to follow our dreams, we're also going to have opportunities. Opportunities are positive. They help us. You don't know, as you described earlier, in what ways they may help us in the future. And so that's a good indication, the opportunities that we have.
Yep, exactly. Moving on to another quote that I liked here. He says, availability is the most reliable predicator of engagement, and then engagement will be the most reliable predicator of success. And availability is also then a decision that we can make. We can decide how available we'll be.
Right.
And then he asks the question, have you noticed that people who seem to accomplish the most always seem to have time for almost anything?
No.
Which is interesting that he says that, because it's true if you think about it.
Right. And you spend your time wondering, how the heck do they ever get anything done?
Right. Like Bob Goff, we're wondering, how does this guy get all that he did? This guy is doing all kinds of stuff all the time. How does he get it all done when he takes 100 phone calls a day and sends 150 emails to himself?
How does he write a book?
Right.
I don't take 100 phone calls a day. I haven't written a book yet. I'd like to, but I haven't written a book yet. How do you do that? He says
he's
that,
the supreme example of this.
Right. And he says that availability can be a huge multiplier in your life. You meet more people, get more invitations, more opportunities will come your way, which seems opposite to getting things done, as he spoke of here.
Right. He says it clearer than I did, but that's kind of what I was getting at a few minutes ago when we were talking about these positive benefits that we're kind of not expecting.
Right.
Is the more invitations, the more opportunities, the more people that we meet and connect with.
He also says, I said this earlier, but I want to repeat it, that people don't follow vision, they follow availability. And he says that he also says that our ambitions should point towards the legacy we want to leave behind. So oftentimes I just connect those two, because oftentimes we think of our vision as kind of our legacy. And if people, as he states here, are not following vision as much as they are following availability, which makes sense logically, that if you make yourself available to other people, you grow in those relationships, you build community around one another and those people that you have interactions with that you wouldn't have had interaction with if you didn't make yourself available. They're more likely to follow the person than they are some grand idea or something that you have to explain, because we see people physically face to face and talk to them. And so just having that relationship and that strong foundation there, that makes sense as to, them following us. And then, so as we are available, and through that availability, opportunities can come. And through those opportunities, we chase our ambitions. He says that our ambitions should point towards the legacy we want to leave behind. Mm-hmm. So if anyone listening to this book so far has been wondering, okay, I just, I want to dream big, I want to have an ambition, I just don't know kind of what that would be, this is a great way of thinking about it. First, that you're available, it creates opportunities. And then when it comes to that dreaming big aspect, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? When you're no longer here on this earth, all of us die. It's a 100% fact. 1 out of 1 do die. That what legacy do we want to leave behind? And that's a good indicator of our ambitions or what our dream may be, whether or not we've taken the time to recognize that. So that was a long connection.
Right, exactly.
But
no, that's
there
good.
we go.
Yeah. And then from there, he moves on to the section talking about sometimes you just need to be available to yourself. And he says, sometimes we go through a day doing all the things we've committed to or that were expected of us without really checking in on ourselves.
Right.
And he says you should ask the questions of how am I feeling? Does God feel near? Am I living out my top priorities and most beautiful ambitions through my choices and actions, etc.? And he says it's not selfish to ask these questions. It's evidence of emotional maturity and self-assuredness.
Yeah.
And that's what he talks about. People who are in tune to their ambitions check in with themselves, ask themselves these questions most often, and that people who are ambitious are really good at doing this, and it comes natural to them. And he says, when you get laser focused on your ambitions and your whole life is angling towards them, you'll see more clearly which of your current commitments and choices are launching you forward and which are standing in the way of your progress. Stop for a moment and recognize this, then develop some situational awareness as you prepare to do something about it.
Right.
And that's kind of a huge little paragraph there with a lot of moving pieces. But breaking that down a little bit, I like that he's talking about if you laser in on those things, then again, a lot of the stuff, kind of talking similarly to previous chapters, a lot of that peripheral stuff,
right,
you'll see that more clearly as peripheral stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Like when I laser in on you right now, you start to realize how much of the room is now in my peripheral. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you can see it for what it is.
Right. Yeah. It's really about becoming aware of yourself. And he has a couple questions in here that he asks, where to kind of help you keep that laser focus and understand what's in your peripherals. He asks questions such as, am I feeling safe, supported, known? Am I expressing myself authentically? Am I saying what I really think? Or am I channeling someone else's explanations about life? And so those are just good ways to keep laser focused, to keep what's in the peripherals, to be aware of ourselves, and really to begin as this transition goes in this chapter to really check with ourselves more often, to be more in tune with ourselves.
Yep, exactly. Huge. If you want to make progress on your ambitions, ask other people about theirs. So he moves into this next section here, and this is all about being just available to other people, but also interested in other people.
Yeah.
Is what he's talking about here. Just be interested in other people. If you're excited about your own ambitions, it's also good to be excited about other people's, because other people have similar ambitions, or they have ambitions that they're just as excited about as you are about yours.
Right. And he says a phrase in here that he repeats several times. He says, be available, which he said in this chapter, talk to everyone. And he's said this in the book before, become their student, not their teacher.
Yeah, that's good.
And then he adds something new to the end of that, which I really love, which is love's goal isn't ever efficiency, but it's presence, which
Right.
ties into that availability aspect.
Right. And going along with that effectiveness and presence, he says, talking about that, what is efficient isn't always necessarily what's effective.
Right.
And we can be too efficient trying to block people out or get every minute of every day productive. We can be too efficient and then lose out on our actual effectiveness with other people.
Right. Right.
And that's something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier because he moves from that. And of course, since these chapters are so short, he moves kind of quickly between the sections. But you covered the networking pretty good in the first part. But I just wanted to read that networking, he says, is for rookies, that networking is nothing more than pretending to be friends with someone while having a secret agenda for someone. So he lays out that distinction there between availability and networking, as you laid out earlier.
So then wrapping up this chapter, as he kind of comes to a conclusion here, he reiterates that being available isn't about giving yourself away recklessly or wearing yourself down to the point where you have no energy to do your own work, but it's actually about keeping yourself open to the world around you so you don't fall back asleep. And then he said one last thing: remember what you've made yourself available to. So again, it's just a constant reminding of yourself, you know, what journey you're on, where you're at, how you're doing, and then also constantly reminding yourself that you need to be available to what you're supposed to be available to, but also making time for the things that you need to focus on. Like he again uses the example of Jesus, is that he closed himself off when he needed to, but then when he wasn't, he was supremely available.
Right. And that's how he was supremely available in the public, was when he was with himself in the private. And that the same will go for us, that the way that we don't wear ourselves down and being reckless with our availability is taking time to be with ourselves, so that ebb and flows very well.
Right. And this last little bit here, at the very end, he says, the trick for leading a noteworthy life is having noteworthy conversations and writing down what you learn. Do lots of that and opportunities will find you. Availability attracts ideas. So write down the good ones and you will gain clarity on your ambitions. And that's how he ends this chapter.
Yes.
And, hopefully that's what we're doing here. We're having noteworthy conversations and we're recording them.
Right.
Or we're writing them down, recording them in the form of this podcast. And so far, I think they've been pretty noteworthy.
Yeah, I think so. And that's
not to toot our own horn, but in the fact that I think it's beneficial for us to have these conversations, even if it's not beneficial for anyone else.
Right.
I think it's noteworthy for us personally.
Right. Yeah. Well, we started this off saying that if we got anything out of this, it would be for ourselves, right? That we would be able to read, and not only read, but also be able to retain these good ideas, not every idea, but these good ideas. And that's why you asked people at the beginning of this podcast to become a part of the conversation, is because as we make ourselves available to other people, and that's us saying, we're available to people who listen or watch, that we can find those good ideas, that we write them down. That's why we would love if people emailed us or commented on any social media platform, their ideas, so that we can continue to be available, keep those opportunities, and write down some good ideas. So we appreciate you all doing that, who are listening and watching.
Exactly. Yep. So that does it for chapter 10.
That's right.
Tomorrow, we're going over chapter 11, Sea Otters. And the subtitle is Hold On Tight to a Couple of People. And should be good.
It will be good.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
One last closing thought. If anyone listening, has been enjoying the podcast, we would love it if you could leave a review and rating on Apple iTunes, if that's where you listen to. And I wanted to throw this out there because I think it might be fun. Mm-hmm. If you leave a rating, or if you leave a review, email us at readtoknowpod@gmail.com. Email us the review, and we'll read it here live on the podcast. If it's a good one or a bad one, I'll read the bad ones too.
Yeah, we'll read the bad ones. We love constructive criticism. We'll take it as constructive criticism. We won't be offended. And really, we would love that. I'm so glad that you said that, because rating and reviews help to elevate our content so that other people can see it. And so that's why it's so important. And that's why if you listen to other podcasts, they probably ask you to do the same thing. So we would love for you to rate and to review. So again, we can see your ideas.
Exactly. Yep. Leave a review, send us an email, and we will read it on the show.
That's right.
Thanks guys for listening. We appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow.